HTML is the most fundamental concept when it comes to web development. If you want to venture into web development, HTML is the first place to start. You cannot do anything in web development without first learning how to use HTML. Well, you're in luck, because in today's video, I'm going to be teaching you about the basics of HTML. This is a simple crash course that is going to help you understand HTML and how it is used to build an actual web page. If you're just learning web development, then this is a great place for you to start. My name is Kutlo. Welcome to Coding 101, where we teach you how to become a better developer one video at a time. So let's get into our video today, where we're just going to be learning the basics of HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and every single website on the internet is made up of three structures: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is the basic structure or the skeleton of every web page. CSS is the styling of the web page, makes the web page looks beautiful in appearance or in its UI or front end. JavaScript is responsible for the functionality of the website. It is essentially responsible for the website coming to life. So you can see that HTML is very important, but without HTML, CSS, JavaScript cannot exist. HTML can exist on its own, but CSS and JavaScript are dependent on HTML for them to exist. That is why we say every single web page on the internet today uses HTML. So this over here on your left is the basic structure that makes up a web page. This is an HTML structure that we just simply made with Emmet. If you're not familiar how to get to this stage, the thing that you need to do is to download VS Code. There are plenty of HTML editors out there, but I prefer VS Code because it has some fundamental tools that can really speed up your development. So go to Microsoft and download VS Code. I'm going to provide a VS Code link in the description box so that you can download VS Code. And after you've downloaded VS Code, what you simply need to do is to go to any folder and open that folder with VS Code. After you've opened that code with VS Code, what you need to do is to go into that folder and create a file called index.html. Then once you're here, you can just simply copy this, or you can just put an exclamation mark and press enter, and your HTML structure is going to be created. So it's as easy as that. So HTML is made up of HTML elements. An HTML element is an individual component of HTML. So for example, we're going to create an HTML element right now. This is called an H1 tag. It's called a header tag. So we're going to say learning HTML. And if we do that, you can see that our H1 tag now is over here. So this over here is called an HTML element, and it is simply a unit of HTML. It is an individual component of HTML. There are plenty of components that make up HTML. So an HTML tag marks the beginning and end of an element. So for example, this over here, this is an HTML, this is an opening tag, and this is a closing tag. So these tags mark the beginning of an HTML element, and this over here marks the end of an HTML element. So in essence, tags are like containers. They tell you something about the content between the opening and the closing tags. Like for example, in the element that we have defined over here, this represents the closing, and then this represents the content within the tag. Sorry about that. This represents the content within the tag, and this is just simply an enclosure. It specifies a heading in the HTML documents, and the words between the opening and the closing tag is a simple heading. Yeah. So elements can be either container elements or standalone elements, sometimes called self-closing elements. Paragraphs or headers, as you can see over here, they have a closing and an opening tag. But there are some elements that are standalone, like the image tag, that does not have an opening element. If we wanted to create an image in our HTML element, this is the tag, this is the element that we would use. And this is a standalone tag because it doesn't have a closing and a beginning tag. So in order to paint an image into our screen, first of all, we need an image. So we can just simply go to Google and just say, get an image over there. We can just say flower, and we can pick whatever flower that we want. Save that image. We need to ensure that we're saving it exactly where we've created that project. I'm gonna go over here, HTML basics. I'm gonna just name it a simple, I'm gonna just flower. And I need to be aware of the file extension. Actually, I don't want to do anything too complicated, so let's try a different flower because I just want a PNG or a JPG so that nothing exactly. So I'm just going to say flower, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say src, and I'm going to say flower.jpg like that. And if we go back to our document, you can see over here that our flower has been painted to the screen. It's a little bit big, and I'm going to show you how you can reduce that flower so that it becomes a little bit smaller. But for now, what we can simply do is just go to that flower and reduce it, probably using paint. You can come over here and resize it. Give it, let's say 200 pixels. This should be fine. And we're going to save that. And if we go back to our document, you can see that our flower is over there. All right. So this image tag, or this image element that you see over here, is a standalone element because it does not have a closing and an opening tag. So notice in the standalone img element, there is no closing tag, but there is a / before the angle bracket. So each element in HTML has its own attribute. So attributes provide additional information about the characterization of the HTML element. So for example, in this element over here, we have something called class. And a class is something that is used along with the CSS file. We're not going to learn about it right now, but just know that there is a property, or there's an attribute within this element called class. And there's another attribute that is used together with CSS called ID. This element also has another attribute called style. And this element has another attribute that we have already used called CRC. And it has plenty of other elements as well, like probably width. So we can actually define the width of this image right here. We can give it a 50 pixel width, and it also has a height attribute. We can give it a 50 pixel attribute, and you can see that this image has been scaled down as a result of those attributes that we have defined over there. So each element has its own set of attributes that it uses in order to be defined in a certain way. So attributes are positioned inside of the opening tag. As you can already see, all these attributes that we have are positioned inside of the opening tag. So if we were to have our attributes in the h1 tag, we would simply come over here and we would say style, and then we would say class over here. And so you could see that they are placed within the opening tag, and they're not placed anywhere else except for that. Attributes are selected from a predefined set of possible attributes depending on the element. So some elements have a particular type or a particular set of attributes, while other elements do not. So for example, in our h1 tag that we see over here, in our h1 element, you could see the src attribute is not available for this particular element because it is not an image element. It's not concerned with an image. So this src is actually called source. So it just gives us, so we just feed it the directory where we want that resource, where we want to fetch a particular resource. So, and then I want to teach you about a concept in HTML called nesting. So nesting, elements can be nested. So what that essentially means is that we can put elements inside of other elements. So for example, there's an element called div. So this div, we can just put another element inside of div. We can actually put a div tag inside of a div tag. So if we were to just write something over here and say hello world, this div often, more than not, just captures the paragraph of something. I'm going to get rid of the CRC and keep our h1. So you can see that this div is nested. This smaller div here is nested inside of the bigger div. We can also put another div over here. We can put the h1 tag as well. And we can just say hello. And you can see that this works appropriately. So when nesting elements, spaces and tabs are often used to sort of like show the level of nesting. And spacing is not required and is only used to make HTML easier to read for human beings. So it doesn't matter the type of indentation that you might have, but in most cases, it's just to show you the type of HTML that are being used within that page. All right, so I think we've learned a lot about HTML. We're just going to take a look at some of the common HTML tags that you probably know or probably don't know. But if you don't know about HTML, so this is going to be a really good tutorial for you. So we're going to learn. We've already learned about the h1 tag, the image tag, and the div tag. I'm going to teach you about some of the other HTML tags that are really popular to HTML. So we're going to first start off with the ones that we have already on the screen, and we're going to define step by step what all of these elements mean. We have this doc type over here, doc type HTML. This is the first element on every HTML page. What it does, it essentially tells the browser to expect HTML and what version to use. For the newer versions of HTML, the element should look exactly like this. So this just indicates the version of HTML that is going to be used. And then here we have the first tag, which is the HTML tag after the doc type. So all page content must be contained inside of the HTML tag. And then after that, we have the head tag, which simply contains machine-readable information about the document, things like title, scripts, and this is whereby we connect our style sheets. Style sheets are our CSS information sheets. So it is a very important tag when it comes to HTML, and it is always structured this way. This part of the head of an HTML document is actually the part that is not displayed in the web browser when the page is loaded. It just simply contains those information like title and links to our CSS, links to our JavaScript. And so most of the time web browsers use the information contained in the head to render the HTML document correctly. So there are many different types of tags that can be included in the head tag, but I've already mentioned the common ones, which are the meta tag, the title tag, the script tags. You can even put the style tag here and the script tags here as well. So if you want to also add like an external CSS file, this is where you probably include it inside of your head tag. All right, let's move on to the next common tag, or the next tag that we see over here, which is simply the body tag. This element just simply contains all the visible content in a page. So whatever you put in the head tag, then you know that it's going to be displayed inside of your browser. The div tag that we already have here is just one of the most popularly used tags around. It is used to create a basic container of other HTML contents or other HTML elements. So it essentially acts like a container of some of the elements that we can add into this div. So you can add many different elements inside of this div. It acts sort of like a parent element. And then we have a p tag, which is simply a paragraph or a section of a body copy. So we can put our paragraphs inside of a p tag. So let's say maybe just like take a paragraph and I'm going to just put it inside of this p tag. And if we were to like save this, you can see that paragraph is properly placed inside of our document. So this p tag is actually a paragraph tag or a paragraph element. So you can mostly use it if you want to put like your paragraphs inside of your page. And then we have our header tags. So our header tags range from H1 to H6 in accordance to the size of those heading or those titles that we would like to put inside of our browser. So you have the H1 tag, which is like the more dominant one or the one that has a larger font. And then we have another one over here, which is slightly smaller than the H1 tag. And then we have another one, which is the H3 tag. So these all range from H1 to H6. You can experiment them and sort of like use them however way you see fit. They're simply headings or titles of pages. And then we have a numbered list or an ordered list tags that we use to create lists. So we can actually create lists in HTML. And so the tags that help us is the OL tag and the UL tag. So the difference between the OL tag and the UL tag is that the OL tag actually stands for ordered list. So the list is actually numbered in a certain way, whether using numbers or Roman numerals or whatever you define. So this just the OL tag just simply defines a small list. So we can just use it over here. And then inside of the OL tag, you can list your content or create your list element as such. So we can just say, we can make our own to-do list over here. We can just say brush teeth. And then let's add in a few more things over here. And we can say take a shower. And then eat breakfast. So you can see that we've just used the OL tag to just simply make a list of items or a list of to-do items as such. So OL once again stands for ordered list, and you can see that it's ordered because there's a number over there. Again, there's the 1, 2, and 3. So if you want to create a list inside of your website, this is the proper way to do it. But if you don't want to create an ordered list, you can use UL, which stands for unordered list. So your list will not be ordered using this UL. There's not going to be numbers, but instead there's going to be like bullets, bullet points, or you can use any other type of identifier in this case. So LI stands for the list element that we want to put inside of our list, and the UL is simply the parent element of our list. All right. So once again, in HTML, as you might probably already know, inside of every single web page, there are links. And links are just used to access other websites or used to access other web pages. So you also use links in order to access different pages within your own website. So in order to use those links or make those links appear inside of our page, we use what we call an anchor tag or an anchor element. And this is how we do it. And inside of here, or it has an attribute. Remember, we just talked about attributes. So one of the special attributes that the anchor element has is the href attribute, which simply is the website, or it is the link that we want our tag to navigate to once it is clicked. So we're just going to create a simple web page. It's going to be, we're going to just redirect to a simple web page, which is www.google.com. And then inside of here, we're going to just put like a wording. I'm going to say Google. And this is actually the text that is going to be displayed inside of our browser. So if we click here, and if you look over here on the corner side of our browser, you will notice that the href or the link is actually being displayed over there on the bottom left corner of our browser. And if we were to click this, then it would simply redirect to Google. But in this case, it didn't redirect completely to Google. And I'll tell you why it didn't. And the reason why is because if we put it like this, our compiler or our browser just simply assumes that we are accessing a page, an internal page inside of our website. So when you get to create websites, you're going to create many different pages. If you're using HTML, you're going to use many different pages. You might use a page. There might be a home page. There might be a contact page. There might be an about page. So you're going to have many different pages. So if you put it like this, it's just simply, your compiler just simply thinks that you're accessing a page that is inside of your website. So in order to actually redirect to a new page, we can just say HTTPS. And if we do it as such, I do believe, and we go back, refresh this, I do believe that it is going to simply redirect to Google. So yeah, that's exactly how it is made. And if you want to redirect to a page, or let's say for example an about page, which is a part of your website, you can just simply say about. So yeah, that's just it. You know what? In fact, let's just create an about page so that we can actually see this in action. I'm just going to come into our folder and I'm going to create a file called about.html, and inside of here I'm just going to create an h1 tag inside of here. I'm going to call it this about page. And so if we put about, we've put about like that, so our anchor tag is just simply going to redirect to our about page. So if we, actually let's get rid of this Google, because now it's no longer a Google anchor list, so we can just put about over here. click, need to add .html over here so that it references that specific page. So if we were to click about over here, you will notice that we have been redirected, or we've been navigated to the about page. You can just simply come over here to go back to our website. So that is the importance of a link or an anchor tag, in our when it comes to HTML. So an anchor tag is also important because it references many different websites. And the link element is a different type of link. Unlike the anchor element, it specifies the relationship between the current document and an external resource. It is often used to link a CSS file with an HTML file. So remember, a CSS file is simply a file where you've stored your CSS or you've stored your stylings inside of that. I'm going to create a CSS crash course that is going to be very important for you to learn. So watch out for that. So it is often the link tag is often used to link a CSS file with an HTML file, so that the external CSS file is used to style the HTML. So this link tag, or this link element, is as simple as just saying link, just like that, and it's a standalone anchor tag. I mean, it's a standalone tag, and we just put src over here, and we just say, maybe if we have a CSS file called main.css, then we can just explain the relationship between that file and our HTML, our main HTML document. All right, so just like that, we have linked our style sheet into our project or into our index.html. So whatever stylings that are contained inside of main.css are going to be used inside of this HTML documents. And then, like any other good coding language, HTML offers a chance for you to comment. So if you want to comment about something, you want to instruct, maybe you're going to forget something, so you just want to make a comment. So in order to comment, just like any other programming language, but except in HTML, it's a little bit different. So you would just simply do this, and then put a dash dash, and if you do that, it's going to create a comment, and you can put your comment inside of this tag. You can just say, hello world, this is comment. So obviously you would already know that this line is not going to be sort of displayed inside of our browser. So just like that, we've managed to add a comment inside of our HTML. In fact, sometimes you get frustrated and you can just comment everything out so that it doesn't ruin your entire code. So in order, there's actually something that I do want to teach you. You can just highlight all of this and just press Control C and K and C, right? Press Control K and C, and you'll be able to comment out an entire line of code. All right, so we're going to move on to tables. Tables are a way to represent complex information in a grid-like format. And as you already know, the tables are made of rows and columns. So tables essentially are a compound elements. So very much similar to the div elements that we talked about earlier, and very much the same as our list element that we have defined at the very top. They are compound elements, and they're made up of different elements. So the first element that makes up a table, of course, is a table element. So we would have to define a table. And inside the table, if we want to define a row, we can just say tr, and just like that, a row is created. And inside of that row, maybe we want to add data or information. So we would just simply say td, so that's table data. And we would say hello table. And just like that, there is our table. Of course, you don't see anything now because everything is sort of the borders have not been enabled. But if we were to enable the borders inside of this table, then it would make much more sense. You know what? In fact, let me just do that for you. I'm going to pause this part of the video because we're not dealing with CSS today, and I don't want you to complicate yourself or crack your head trying to figure out what all of this means. So I'm going to pause the video and add my CSS. All right, so I've just created my CSS. And before we continue, I do want to mention that over here, I use the src attribute, I was supposed to use href instead of crc. I've actually created our main .css file, and I've put our CSS inside of that file, and essentially that is going to apply all of our CSS or our CSS attributes to these files that we have over here. But I don't want to concern you too much with the CSS aspect of web development. So let's get back to our table and just create another row, a simple row. I'm going to put some table data inside of that. I'm going to say Dumela, which is like good morning in my language, and we just created another row like that. We can actually create some headers over there. We can just say table header over here. I'm going to say greetings. Alright, so this is our table header that we have. Oh, sorry, that's not table header, that's actually table data. So this th is our table header. So we're just going to say greetings. And just like that, we've created our table header. And if you're wondering how we're going to create columns inside of our table, there is simply no direct element to implement a column. So I'm going to just change this to Ola, so that it just makes much more sense. And then I'm going to create another row, and then I'm going to say, I don't know how to spell bonjour. I'm going to assume this is how it is spelled. So if we want to create like a column that simply describes what type of language that is, so what we simply do is just come over here to our table row and just create another table data tag. And as simple as that. So if we say Spanish over here, so first I think we need to go to our table headers, and then wrap the table header inside of a tr tag. So you can see how compounded all these elements are that have to deal with the table. So I'm just going to say table header, and I'm going to say greetings, and I'm going to create another table header. Sorry about that. And I'm going to say language, just like that. We're going to come over here, I'm going to say table data. So this is Setswana, this is a language in Africa where I'm from. And we're going to put table data over here, and this is going to be, I'm going to say French. And just like that, we have created a table with 2 columns. And how many rows are here? 1, 2, 3, 4. So a table with 2 columns, 2 rows. Okay, so if we wanted to add an additional column, once again, we just come to our table rows and we would just say th, and we can say country, and a third column, will be added. So in order to fill that column, we would just simply say Spain. We would come over here, it's our table data element, and we would say Botswana. Come over here, table data, and we would say France. And just like that, we have managed to create a table with 3 columns and 4 rows. It's easy as that with HTML. So I think that's about it regarding tables. I'm just going to get rid of the things that we've made at the very top, because I think you probably understand how everything is done, particularly the image tag, because it's taking much of our space. And I'm going to get rid of the list tag as well, and these are the tags as well. Alright, maybe get rid of the anchor tag. Okay, awesome. Now I'm going to minimize our table over here so that we can make space for more elements. So the last thing that we're going to learn in this tutorial is form elements or input elements. In fact, one of the main components of a web page is forms. So it would be very hard to collect data without them. And to make a good form, we must know the basic input type in HTML. So we're going to be talking about input types in HTML. HTML forms are used to collect data from a user who visits your websites with the help of input tags. So these input tags improve the user experience and just makes the form a little bit more interactive. So the more commonly used input types is a button, a checkbox, color, date, email, file, image, and many more like that you can probably learn on your own. But I'm just going to show you some of the basic ones, or the basic syntax ones. So we're going to first start off by defining, or just like understanding, the input element. So in order to create an input element, you just come over here. It's just the same as everything else. There's a standalone tag, but because it has a variety of elements that are associated with it, so it has an attribute called type, where you would have to essentially pick from this list that you see over here. So it's quite a lot. No, it's actually not a lot. So the first thing, of course, we're going to start with is a button. So we could have a input button, and it is very, very simple. Of course, we have to put like some type of text over there. Is it text or is it placeholder? You say value, and then you say submit. So the value is going to be the text that is inside of that HTML input tag. So in order to skip a line, you just say BR like this, and there's going to be a line of white space that is going to be skipped. So we've just simply made a submit button. Of course, you can use the button tag in order to make a button. It's still all the same, but this is just a little bit more, I guess, maybe fancy. And the good thing about this is that you can use it with a form. And then the next element, or the next input element rather, that you, input type element that you can learn is the password text field. So you can just come over here and just say type, and then say password, and just like that, the password field is going to be created. And everything that we put in here, you'll see that it's going to be hidden. So that's the good thing about that. That means we don't have to implement this on our own. We can just simply say type password. So nobody's going to see your password. With this, there's also a radio element that you can use with this input tag. So you just simply come over here and say type radio, and a radio button is going to be created. It's trying to save, so I'm just going to not save that. So this is a radio. You can make all different types of radios, radio buttons with this one. That's the good thing about it. And also what you can do is, so you can make all different types of radio buttons. So let's just actually make 2 radio buttons that we can choose from. So in order to make a radio button, let's just skip a line over here so that we can separate what we're trying to do. Maybe 2 lines. All right, so to make a radio, I would just simply come over here and I would give it a name so that it's clear what it is. This is just a selection. Maybe it's a yes and no choice. Yes or no. So maybe I would make a p tag over here. Do you like this tutorial? And you have to say yes or no. So the value of this, the first radio button, is actually going to be yes. And we're going to give it a label. There's an HTML tag called label, which does exactly what it says it does. This is a standalone tag. We don't even need to close this one, I think. Oh, actually, I think we do. It's not a standalone tag. This is yes. So we can just say label like that, and this was going to be our yes. And what we have to do is we have to say for, so that we can associate it with what we have defined at the top. And so what we do is that we give it the value of actually we're supposed to give it an ID over here. ID is going to be yes. So this label is going to be associated. So our compiler knows to put this label right next to this radio button that you see over here. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to just get rid of this. So with our no option, so I'm just going to copy this, and this is going to be no. I'm going to give it an ID called no, and our for is going to be no. The value of this radio button is going to be no, and the label should read no. So there you have it. We have our yes and no radio button, as you can see over there. So this is a very interesting way to implement a radio button. It's not actually interesting. It's like the standard way to actually show how to create an HTML radio button. So we can also create an input. Let's just make sure we skip a line. We can also create an input element that allows us to attach files. You know, sometimes like maybe for example in your Facebook you're required to attach your profile picture, or in your email you're required to attach attachments. So this is if you want to create a website like that, this is one of the tags that you can use to just simply attach documents, images, whatever you want to attach into your website. So in order to do, we would just simply say file over here to illustrate that this is a file uploader. And just like that. And so we can just come over here and we can click over here and we can go to whatever we want to upload. I'm going to go to my images and I'm going to come over here and have managed to upload an image with that file uploader. So there are many different use cases for this input tag. There are many different use cases, and if you want to learn more, I am going to put a link inside of the description box so that you can learn many different use cases for this input element or this input tag. But the basic usage of it, honestly, is just to capture information. And most of the time, in order to capture information in such a manner, you would have to circle this input element with a form. And in order to do that, I'm going to just show you a simple authentication form that you might use for your login page or something remotely close to that. So in order to do that, I would have to come over here. Let me just skip a line. ER, remember, line break. And I would just come over here and I would say form, just like that. So that's an element. And inside of this, I'm going to create, let's say, maybe a label for our input tag. So that label is going to be username. I'm just going to put, yeah, that's good. And I'm going to put our for. Remember, for, it just essentially associates that label with a particular element. So this is going to be for username, I guess. That's fine. And then we're going to create that element, that input element. So this is going to be type, and this is going to be text. So if we put text here, that means it's a text box. I'm going to give it an ID of username. Remember that for that we have defined here simply references our ID. And that's how it associates that label with the input element. And then we're going to create the value of that. Actually, we don't have to create a value. I think that's sufficient. But if we were to create a value, we would just simply say maybe coding 101. We can put a value inside of that. That will be like sort of the default value. And just like that, we've created an element over there. Let's create a second line break. Maybe 3 line breaks will do, so that we can separate what we're doing over here. You can see it a bit more clearly. All right. Now what's left to do is just to create the password aspect of this. So I'm going to create a line break over here to separate our password and our username text box. Sufficient. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say password. Even here as well. I'm going to say password. And because this is a password, then we need to identify it as a password field. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say password. I'm not going to give it a value. We can choose to give it a value or we can choose not to give it a value. I'm going to give it an empty value. And so just like that, we've managed to create a form that is going to allow us to capture our login information. But before we do that, we actually have to create our submit button, remember, because we can't log in into a page without actually submitting. So I'm just going to say input again, type, can you guess? Submit. And then we're going to give it a value called submit. Essentially the same thing that we just did at the top. just like that, we managed to create our very own login form. So it's as simple as that. I think I'm going to stop here. So this is just like a simple HTML crash course, just to teach you about some of the basic elements when it comes to HTML, and essentially just teach you what HTML is about. If you're a beginner and if you actually enjoyed this tutorial, I would encourage you to reach out to me. I have a tutorial that will simply teach you how to become a developer from the ground up, from beginner to professional, or whatever stage that you would like to reach. So if you would like to sign up to that, be sure to get to my email. If it's not in this channel, it's in one of the channels. So just look for my email and just contact me, and I'll be happy to assist you in that journey. So thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe. Please remember to subscribe to this channel. And if you've enjoyed, then you definitely need to subscribe and like. If you've enjoyed, subscribe and like. And if you have any questions, like I always say, leave those questions in the comment section and I'll be sure to reply. Thank you so much. I will see you next time on Coding 101.